crap, it's the 11th day already of June. What the hell is up with all of that? I'm going to be your host tonight, Dana Durnford. You can call in at 709-589-4406 or text if that's your thing. Got a poll, a good poll tonight. It canceled itself. I had to restart the poll. Has 80 years of nuclear power plants, meltdowns, ocean dumping, fuel pool emissions, and the list is very long. And the fuel pool emissions is one of the worst ones, jeopardized the future of humanity and the 8 million species. Well, that's a roger that. Pretty hard to deny that one, I'll tell you what. Yeah, let's try that again. A little slow here today. Lots to get through, and I mean lots. I'm talking about Russia and Ukraine nuclear power plant right off the bat. And so much to get through. It's just a smorgasbord of wow. Let's get on with that. I'm going to play a video because the theme tonight is always going to be the poll, right? Has 80 years of nuclear power plants, the meltdowns, the venting, the leaking, the hemorrhaging, the explosions, the sea dumping, ocean dumping, the lakes and estuaries and streams, the constant emissions from the fuel pools, which is very few people understand that one, direct threat to humanity. That's the theme tonight. We're going to go into a news cycle and run through that. We got aliens, 12 alien spacecrafts. We got Michael Schellenberg. It's like throwing a big turd in the punch bowl when you put Michael Schellenberg into the equation, right? But it's very strategic, too. I'm only saying it because it's history, you know. I'll explain myself after. Let's play this little video. This is Castle Bravo. This is equal to 1,000 Hiroshima's basically going off at the one, or Nagasaki's going off at the one time. And the difference was Hiroshima was a uranium nuclear weapon. Nagasaki was a plutonium. But to kind of give you some context of how lethal doses of radiation from a nuclear explosion actually works, and this, because these are big bombs, right? Which is what we currently would be using. Have a load.
The whole picture of fallout contamination becomes of increasing importance with high-yield weapons. In one program, drone ships were sent into fallout areas to evaluate the worth of a washdown system for ship decontamination. We found we could measure fallout even in large ocean areas by making aerial surveys using extremely sensitive radiation detection equipment and with surface craft such as tugs and destroyers. As a result of these measurements, we were able to document for the first time fallout data from high-yield detonations. It is now known that fallout from the larger Castle shots blanketed areas of more than 5,000 square miles with radioactive material that would have been lethal to unprotected personnel. This one result gives a new insight into a method for using high-yield weapons in both strategic and tactical situations.
That's quite a statement. 5,000 square miles would be a lethal dose. Now, these are big bombs. These are megaton bombs. These are 1,000, well, they're more than a megaton. There are 1,000 Hiroshimas, which was 15 kilotons. So that's 1.5 megatons, basically, detonation from just the single Castle Bravo. But radiation is radiation, and it's forever. So the Bikini Islands, because put that into perspective, if that was a biological chemical weapon, one or the other, right? Particularly chemical, say for instance, and biological obviously is frightening as it gets. I'm just having longevity in my mind is the reason I said that. Okay, so this was a study from 2019. The radiation fallout has contaminated a huge swath of the land and the ocean, extending over 1 million square kilometers and severely impacting the habitability of the affected atolls. So you had 1 million square kilometers and just one bomb. Now you're talking about the actual ocean, the ocean floors and the little atolls and islands. These beautiful paradises, these oases, like Christmas Island, Maralinga, these wonderful islands, the French Polynesian islands. And the nuclear industry went out and got all these beautiful paradise islands and just blanketed them, everything around them for 1 million square miles with generational radiation fallout. It's pretty insidious. It's not an accident. They, as you see here way back, and the idea they were creating a fog to stop the radiation from landing on deck. Obviously, this was a problem, right? And who know better than the people ground zero? And of course, we got hindsight because we can look back in hindsight. But so 5,000 square miles of lethal doses. And you remember that Chinese ship. Cesium-137 contamination in the fruits of the northern Marshall Islands was 1 million square kilometers. So this is why we got a poll, because once in a while we're going to talk about this kind of stuff. Has 80 years of the disaster, the disease factories known as nuclear power plant, meltdowns included, sea dumping, ocean dumping, rivers, lakes, estuaries, fuel pool emissions. And what we're talking about there is invisible plumes all day hemorrhaging out of these facilities from the fuel pools. I just wanted to show these pictures because I couldn't find them the last show. I was trying to give you context of the size of each of the reactors in Japan. They built this off-site and brought it in and assembled it around the reactor 1. And this was a Kevlar sarcophagus. So you see the little hooks? Right, you see the little hooks along this ring? What that's meant to do is catch these great big panels. These are Kevlar. So they built a Kevlar sarcophagus, and they're meant to sit there with gravity. Now, there is footage that apparently shows people on top of that. Now, I can fake myself on top of that pretty quick, right? No, you can't, Dana. That's impossible. No, well, hang on. I can do it in real time if you like. There you go. I'm up there. Not convincing enough? I'll just reproduce myself right down to a little spot. Hello, everybody. I'm on top of the reactor 4. We're going to hook up the fuel coverage here, and we're going to get a beer with some tattoo guys and some sake. So you can fake it pretty easy if you wanted to, but it wouldn't be surprising for them to sacrifice homeless people and put them on top of. Now they left that sarcophagus there for 5 years, and if you took off a 1 square meter chunk of that, took it to the New York subway, everybody that walks past it for 1 million years would drop dead that day. That's how radioactive we're talking about. Because you just think of this as a smokehouse, but instead of smoke, it's radioactive emissions that are absurd numbers. Okay, here we go. Oh. So, because we talk about quasi-electric, which is going to do geothermal by using the hell was the name of? I'll show it in a minute here anyway. So there's another way to do geothermal, and I was thinking about it. And so geothermal is the black sheep of the energy industry apparently. But it's the most sensible one by all means. There's a $4 million grant from the EU Horizon 2020 program to help researchers from the consortium to develop a new generation of drilling systems could unlock the potential for deep geothermal energy. Current drills problems are the bits, right? And so if you go down a couple of miles and break the bit, you got to pull it back up. That's going to take a couple of days. So current drill penetrates, and you could break one every few hours. You got to pull it up, and now they were looking at 1 to 2 meters per hour with this new system, which is going to use high pressure water to cut up the rocks, and a pneumatic hammer. That the new drilling techniques will work at up to 10 meters per hour, which is about 100 feet, or 30 feet. I'll get it in a second. And it could reduce the drilling cost by 65%. So what they call priming the rocks for easier breakage with the drills after. So bear with me. And they'll combine high-pressure water jets and downhole fluid-driven hammers to tap into geothermal reserves, temperature reserves, so they can circulate water, and when it comes up, it's very hot water. High-powered advanced hammer actions and high-pressure water jet system. We know water can cut rocks, right? And cut metal in factories and stuff like that at high pressure. Okay, so the significance is expected to be ready for the prototype in 2024. By 2024, so 10 meters per hour. So every 3 hours, it's 100 feet, basically. Yeah, 3 hours is 100 feet. So in about 40 days to 50 days, you can drill down 7 kilometers or 7 miles, which should take you the other way. The conventional way would take you 6 times longer. So that's a significant technique. Now, if you married that technique, I wonder, with the quasi-energy technique, because they were going to use X-rays to melt the rocks, to vaporize the rocks. X-rays to melt the rocks, and they're also going to up the ante by vaporizing the rocks. So you got quasi-electric and the other system working together. I wonder, would that work? But anyway, there is solutions on the highway to make this. So, like, you're talking about $4 million. The Americans just blew $6 billion, not to mention all the tax credits and everything else on nuclear, right? You spend a lousy $4 million, but look at the results. You can make drilling 7 times faster at depth. And the market for geothermal drill bits for the next decade or two was around $50 billion or something. I can't remember the timeline. But anyway, they're estimating a $50 billion market. Well, everybody's going to visit Fukushima nuclear meltdown now. That's pretty crazy. 12 years, no, sorry, nobody home. Taiwan delegation, because South Korea allegedly went over there, and the media was claiming it's okay to lift all the embargoes from South Korea now against Japan because nuclear scientists went there, everything was okay, and the nuclear scientist was like, can't wait to get on a plane and get out of this crazy country. And because I'm always complaining about this picture, we're usually looking at it from the other direction, so now they're going to feed it to us. That's the first time I've seen that picture flipped around. Hard cases. By the way, we counted the tanks there with absurd amount of different pictures we got. And the most we came up with 750. And that's if you include, right, you see up there the last set of tanks, there are a bunch of small tanks. I zoomed in on them, right? Those tanks up there and those tanks right behind. If you count them, there's 750. But there's not 750 large ones. Right? So there's not 1,000 either, right? They're all built in 2013, 2014. Potatoes. A delegation, they claim, from the Atomic Energy Council of Taiwan. Now, Taiwan, of course, you look at Taiwan's nuclear legacy, it's like, oh my God. I wouldn't trust them with a matchstick, let alone a fuel rod. I don't even know where to start. They got so many bumbles, like deadly lethal bumbles. You know, they went to the natives on Orchard Island and said, hey, we'd like to put a canning factory here for salmon and tuna and stuff like that. And the natives were like, wow, that's pretty cool. We like that. And said, well, we'll give you a little stipend back to the community, each person in the community, if you let us do it. And he said, sure. So the Taiwan nuclear industry built a nuclear dump out there on Orchard Island where the natives were too. They chased them out there and then they built a nuclear dump out there. Just vicious, eh? And so once they realized what was there was already up and running, they started protesting in the Taiwan nuclear industry, like, too bad. So sad, too bad. Right? Read the fine print before you do anything with us. Which was unbelievably despicable until you look at what they done after Fukushima, when they had over 2,000 university students taking nuclear degrees because they got major nuclear educational programs in our country. And their pro-nuclear is despicable. They had 2,000 students spam the internet for several years online during class each day with propaganda about nuclear and Fukushima, claiming it was innocuous and benign and like a banana and a potato chip. It was like potassium and magnesium. And he challenged just tens of thousands of conversations or debates, went into the comment section and fought with people by using propaganda. So there hardly somebody I'm going to be putting it'll be interesting. Like, South Korea came back and they kept their mouth basically shut. It looked like they were in shock, right? They looked like Miles O'Brien, except, he was missing a limb when he came back, right? Fukushima, after a decade, had to cut his arm off, apparently, because he had some hard drives he didn't pass over, I guess. Fukushima, after a decade, man explores abandoned vintage cars in Japan. So look how carbon-free nuclear is. You got to sacrifice everybody over the age of 60. Should be prepared to die, and you got to be prepared to abandon your community. And the only people going back there are people that are actually stupid. The reason everything got left behind. Look, no, nothing. Look. Bob begins with B and ends with B. That's all that matters, I suppose. abandoned places. So they go into Fukushima Prefecture, right into the no-go zones, the evacuated communities. Quite a few times we've covered some of their antiques. But I mean, you got to shave your head if you go in that zone first off. You got to throw away all your clothes, all your material, your cameras and everything. All you can take away is basically the hard drive. Everything else is going to be incredibly radioactive. You got to get rid of your shoes, your socks, your underwear. You're still going to get brutal doses because you can't have filters that'll filter something on the scale we're talking about. But what it was interesting, right? When the nuclear industry says that the nuclear power has never harmed anybody, quite the bold statement, right? How many people there do you think would call nuclear carbon-free, green and net zero and everything else? So you have to leave, the banks ran away, the schools, hospitals ran away with billions of dollars of equipment left behind. That was looted. It was actually looted out of the hospitals and sent to some poor country, I guess, to make a profit, and they're going to radiate every patient in those hospitals. It's sickening. So if you gather up all this stuff, you're talking about ultimately making millions of people sick in the long run by distributing this into the environment. But the leftists, no. First off, the amount of radioactive fallout in this is out of Okuma, Furuba, which are on both sides of the Nami, say, or, they're within a few kilometers. He was talking about how all the good stuff was stolen. The expensive stuff was already stolen, but you can see everything rusted. But they can't resist it. And then they got this cheap Geiger counter, and they're basing, because they read the propaganda, so they're basing their safety off this cheap gamma, which doesn't read betas or alphas or neutrons or x-rays, and doesn't do a good job at all of beta or gamma. And they're counting it in microsieverts and millisieverts instead of thinking of airborne particulates. It's astounding that they can operate a camera, but not really, right? If you buy into the propaganda, go out and read, if you go read United Nations material and go into a nuclear wasteland, you're a dead man walking. Look at me, I'm stupid as a rock. I'm the epitome of stupid. Going into a nuclear wasteland, first off, is definition of stupid. But going in without your paper suit, that's unforgivable. But a paper suit can't protect you, by the way. You don't want to go into it. But you can't filter it because it's so tiny. You're 200 million atoms on the head of a needle. Just one of them can make you sick in increments over decades. Many of them is going to frig you up, going to saturate your body with white blood cells because you have to attack everything pulsing in your body every second. And the numbers we're talking about are absurd. South Korea's sea salt demand grows. So, right, they're running these headlines, pretty salacious headline. It's a crazy headline when you realize what has already happened 12 years ago. So the assumption is nothing has happened for 12 years. So they're afraid something is going to happen, and there's a great big demand for sea salt before Fukushima dumps the radiation into the ocean. So we basically don't even have any common sense left on the planet. There's no common sense whatsoever now. We have abandoned all rationale. Everything is in the tanks, Dana, so stop fear-mongering. Except for reactor 3, of course. There's the plume over there, covering the entire planet in 26 days. But no, we're worried about they're going to dump it in the ocean in the future, Dana. That stuff, that's not true. That's propaganda. I'm so far. I still can't comprehend how the planet could be asleep. I do, but it still shocks me. There's this whole system out there meant to sleep, go back to sleep. It works diligently to get you back to sleep if you're not. So how can it all be in the tanks when it's already long gone before day 7? And we know where it's gone to. It's gone right around the entire planet. And the French's model is a proper model for dispersion, right? So, but this is only based on venting. This is the French's government, the official government model. And you're based right now at 19 days. Now you're at 25 days, you're at 30 days. You get where I'm going with this. It never stops, right? Just because the video clip stops don't mean the radioactive. This is not a little plume floating around, the wind blows this way and blows it that way. This is covering the entire biosphere from the bottom of the ocean to the top of the atmosphere. We're worried about what might happen instead of being appropriately worried by what has happened. So they got the whole planet hoodwinked, but does that mean the food is safe? Does that mean the air is safe? Does that mean, you can't change what happened, but you can make adjustments so you can have, and your loved ones in some ways can have a better than what they're going to end up with if they're not careful. So eating food from Japan is a good way to have strokes and heart attacks and diabetes and Down syndrome for your children being born, and Alzheimer's, dementia, and autism at a young age. South Korea's sea salt demand grows ahead of the planned release from something that has already happened 12 years ago. So they got the planet manipulated into believing it never happened. And that's a really kooky statement, but let me quantify that. Because to me, it's no big deal. To you who don't know any better, it's confusing, I'm sure, right? So reactor 3 is to your right, and reactor 4 is to your left. And so the rest of reactor 4 and the fuel pools and the reactor cores are at the top of the building to the right. Just hang on because I got to jump around a bit. So all these years later, basically, when we start looking at the big picture of what the nuclear industry has got done to us, this was a great big pulse, this one right here in particular. I was just looking for one clip to kind of tell-all clip to play for you. Here you go, this is just one of many, many journalists that made the same video. They're pretending they're in the building to the left. And it's the craziest video imaginable.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011, leading to the country's worst nuclear disaster.
So the media, and a lot of media, done exactly that same thing in 2013 and 14, claim when the building actually looked like that, except now they had a remember that reactor 1 I showed you earlier where they put this Kevlar sarcophagus around it? Well, they didn't really even do that. Sometimes I struggle, eh? Hang on, we'll get it. It's the only thing we're good at, really, anymore. Where's reactor 4? There she blows. I was just looking for another example to go with it. It doesn't really matter. So, let me jump in there for you, actually. So you can see the building stump of reactor 4. So they put this, they built this off-site and brought it in. Now it doesn't physically touch the building. There's nothing in there. You can't survive up there, right? This is all done off-site and then reassembled with cranes. This is lethal doses. But that's the bottom of 100. This building is supposed to be 190 feet tall. So they pretended by putting this construction over the building to your left. It's just these panels again. And the panels, those panels are put there by gravity, right? And again, you can see all the hooks on the beams. So there's nothing left of the building. The fuel pools were at the very top of the building, there, and where she's claiming she's in the fuel pool would have to be up here. So this is the story that they worked out, and they're like, yeah, let's do that one. And then we'll get everybody to worry about what might happen instead of what already happened, which was total, complete destruction. But the planet is so manipulated, they're so fearless, that they got people so pumped, and this is writers, they got them pumped up into thinking it might happen, so they're buying sea salt, despite the fact that this has already happened. And they've been doing this for a long time, but they're so comfortable with the deception, the unbelievable deception, that they got the planet. Calling concerns about Fukushima water scaremongering is the real fake news. So this is South Korea. Now South Korea is going to perpetrate, again, this is another facet. There's over 80% of the population is upset. And 80% of the population, they got manipulated into believing that they're going to dump the water that's already been dumped for 12 years into the ocean, and then the damage will happen. This is astounding. It's such a convoluted story, but it's really simple when you look at the evidence. So then there's reactor 3. So that's the ghost of reactor 3. That also is supposed to be 190 feet tall, a 19-story building, 65-meter buildings, 19 stories. And so people are protesting the street, don't dump it in the ocean. It's already long gone. And so because people are so complacent and so malleable, they just said, fuck it. And they're growing food right alongside the 1-ton bags of radiation. They just don't care anymore. Don't say nothing unless it's a lie, basically. That's the rule of thumb, apparently, with this lot. They're like, no, data, that's a little extreme. They're like, no, actually it's not. That's in a no-go zone. That's in a nuclear wasteland no-go zone. And in 2019, there was 105,000 of these storage sites. They're growing food right alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation in a no-go zone, surrounded by no-go zones, claiming that everything is in the tanks when the buildings don't even exist anymore. And we counted the tanks. And tanks, if you count the small ones, and I did, you only had 750. But you got them that matter fighting, let me back up. Now, originally, in 2015, it was 150,000 sites like this. And like that's, what I showed you was mild compared to the volumes that are, like the volumes are, there's huge volumes of bags. There's around 150,000 sites. But the truth doesn't matter. The truth is not doesn't matter because everybody's invested in the lie. Everybody's invested heavily in the lie. So the female divers, and I love this culture, by the way. It's an incredible culture. It's several thousand years old. And they'll dive right up until the day when they're ready to have a baby. Have the baby, you're back in the water, diving the next day. And these are extreme dives. I got thousands and thousands and thousands of hours under the ocean. But it's hard, when you look at what they're doing, this is very difficult. Sea cucumbers, no oxygen, no backpacks. I don't know, I was trying to figure out what that was, because I seen her looking at it. You see it in the top left-hand part of the picture. And so when I zoomed in on it, I still can't say for sure what it is. It could be nothing or it could be something. But when you do it traditional generation after generation after generation, you do it as a child, all the way up until your 60s and 70s. And so they're worried sick that Japan is going to pollute the ocean when Japan has already polluted the ocean, right? Nothing's too confusing anymore. And so when I done the West Coast, from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska year after year, the species to the left didn't come back, were exterminated. And they never came back. And so I'd done this year after year after year. The pictures to the right are the post-Fukushima pictures. So they call it climate change, we call it Fukushima, right? But they call it climate change. But see, now they're worried about what swimming in the radioactive water is going to do to them and their descendants. There's more than 3,000 female divers in Jeju, and 85% of them are over 50 years of age. Wow. It's a cool life, but it's a tough life. Well, at least they're getting the big bucks down there for it, right? Japan's plan to dump nuclear-contaminated water from the Fukushima nuclear power plants into the seas, drawn widespread concern among female divers in South Korea. Right, so you got all these emaciated seals, emaciated sea lions, emaciated dolphins and porpoises, emaciated whales. And so now they're trying to blame the tens of thousands of dead whales on ship strikes. And they always say, well, it could be a ship strike caused by a human. Whales don't die naturally, which is kind of true now, apparently. Sailboat crew rescued in the Pacific after abandoning ship sunk by a whale. And so I was reading this story, and there have been about 1,200 reports of whales and boats colliding since 2007, when a worldwide database was launched in 2007. And this was 2023, March the 20th. This was 2 months ago, where the numbers of whales that have died, I mean, the gray whales have lost around 10,000 whales since Fukushima. And the majority of them were emaciated. And then they get struck by ships, maybe. But in the database, there's only around 1,200. So be very careful of the propaganda machine. They're propaganda machine is pretty vicious. Fukushima residents hope the world will oppose Japan's nuclear contaminated water discharge plan. So, how am I supposed to have a conversation when everybody's living in denial? It's so tough on me. Because you got all these stories with all kinds of propagandas, and the propaganda is based on propaganda itself. Hard cases. So it makes it very difficult for me, who know the difference, to try to be sensible. And you're up against a pretty, that's reactor 3, the stump of reactor 3. And there's the stump of reactor 4 to your left, but here's everybody to the right pretending they're at the top. And they don't have both reactor 3 and reactor 4, by the way. So, hope the world will oppose it. They must not discharge the nuclear contaminated water in the sea and pollute the ocean. Yeah, but that's what they've been doing for 12 years straight, of Neptunian covering the entire planet, not just the ocean. You got plutonium covering the entire planet, not just Neptunium. And plutonium, of course, is named after the devil. You had studies of 1,500 atoms of the radioactive sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs per cubic meter in California, 5,500 miles away. You had 20 million particles of radioactive iodine-131, 220 million in another study of the iodine-129. These are different isotopes, multiple different isotopes. You had the cesium plume models, you had the xenon plume models, you got more cesium plume models, you got plume shoving the whole planet covered in 26 days, in the top left-hand corner in 20 days. You got 6-year model of just if it was only going into the ocean. Unfortunately, it's airborne and oceans. No, none of that exists. That's pure propaganda. Dana's spreading propaganda. Dana, they're going to dump it in the ocean starting this summer, Dana. Get your facts straight, Dana. Okay. Jeez, calm down, Charlie. They must not discharge the contaminated water into the sea, which is what they've been doing for 12 years straight. No, but you got the whole planet. Not the whole planet, but, well, I guess, there's, how many people's here tonight? 23 people? We're winning. Come on over to the winning side. Has 80 years of nuclear disease factories, meltdowns, sea dumping, ocean dumping, fuel pool emissions hemorrhaging from 1,000 fuel pools worldwide, about 120,000 liters from each pool, hemorrhaging into the environment, jeopardized future humanity. Hanford, in the 50s and 60s, dumped 450 billion gallons directly into the soil of nuclear sludge during the madness of the Soviets and Americans and the Manhattan projects, right into the soil. So that's equal to a 6-foot wide aquarium, 518 feet tall, wrapped around the entire planet. Except this is not an aquarium, they dumped it in the soil. But that's how much we're talking about. A 518 feet wall, 6 feet wide, wrapped around the entire planet Earth of nuclear waste dumped into the soil. Now, Dana, it could all fit into a swimming pool. I'm losing my mind. I'm losing it. I'm finally losing my mind. Tuesday's new one, disaster in Japan. Oh, this is March the 15th. I get a kick out of this beauty, this story. So this is 4 days later, and 500 bone marrow transplant centers across Europe are being asked to be on standby to treat Japanese radiation victims if the need arises. They're like, no, everything's cool, except that everything wasn't cool. On Tuesday, crews returned to work to bring electricity to the facility and turn the lights back on in the control room. Uh-huh. Sure you did. 2023, Japan's nuclear wastewater discharge plan provokes worldwide protest. I pulled most of the hair out of my head already when I read that yesterday. So I'm not going to entertain you tonight. I know, bummer. So does that look destroyed, or am I just being weird? Maybe the whole planet's right. There's nothing to worry about. It's all in the tanks. You need a little watch when I say that, right? It's all in the tanks. What? It's in the tanks? Yeah, it's in the tanks. Holy shit, they're going to dump it in the ocean, Dana. Russia. Let me back to Charlie up. We forgot to cover Russia. Well, that sucks. And I promised everybody I was going to cover Russia right away. Danny, you bastard. So, the reactors at the Zaporizhzhia, whatever you call it, nuclear disease factories, are shut down. Not after a bunch of close calls and incredible scares and losing pumping and electricity and everything else, but they shut them all down a few months back, right? Well, 6 months ago or something like that. And so you just got to get 120,000 liters into the fuel pool each day, but that's supposed to be special water. That has to be incredibly filtered of minerals and everything else, right? So they can do that, draw that from the river, or the big river that they're alongside of on their own for the fuel pools, but they don't have a running reactor, right? They don't need 1 million gallons a minute, 4,500 tons a minute. So that's how I'm seeing it. Now the dams were blown up, but it sounds, the consensus is they were blown up, and we've heard so much, we're assuming that's true. That's an ecological disaster for sure, but when it comes to the nuclear power plant, hopefully, get some water on that puppy. It sounded like Howard Cosell. As far as I know, the reactors were shut down quite a while ago. But I don't know for sure. The media is pretty vague. I read several stories about it today. And you're getting the same narrative each time. The plants are okay. And you can't believe the system, and you can't find anything to contradict or to... You're not finding anything independent? Well, at least I'm not anyway. And Tuesday, crews work to bring electricity back to the facility. Well, how do you bring lights back to these facilities? Okay, back to this one. Japan's nuclear wastewater discharge plan provokes worldwide protests. So this is China, right, is purposely driving out that narrative. Taiwan. So you got China, well, you got Japan, China behind them. You got, or north, behind them and north. You got south, you got Taiwan and South Korea. And so they're working together. The nuclear industry in each of these countries, in relations with, coordinated by the International Atomic Energy Agency, has worked. And then the rest of the media worldwide is just supporting whatever their narrative is. And the lobbyists are going to write the stories anyway, right? So this has already happened. We have lost the inventories of the reactors at the facility. And they went so far as to fake it. So do you really think they won't fake the water? They fake the reactors. It's not a very big stretch to fake the waters. And so we're kind of on the fence of what will happen. Will they say, oh, okay, well, there'll be enough protests, because they're inciting the protests. So it seems logical that they're trying to get the whole planet to make a noise, and then they're going to say, oh, well, we'll store it. And then the world is celebrating and say, well, we saved the oceans from Fukushima, right? Way to go, guys. Pat everybody on the back. And this is some Wally and Beaver public relation firm thought it up, and now they got to follow through with the propaganda, right? Editorial from the Korean Herald on June 9. Japan has begun the countdown to release into the Pacific Ocean wastewater from the crippled, two-eyed, four-leg nuclear power plant that don't exist anymore. They've already lost everything. You can't put something in the... You can't put something in the ocean. I mean, they can't contain it. It's very frustrating, though. We're getting saddled with these headlines every day of this panic based on propaganda, right? This is the ultimate lie, is what they're trying to do right now. And so they need the world. What they look to be doing is trying to get the world to come out and say, don't dump it in the ocean. Then they can play the hero, right? Come to their senses, not dump it in the ocean, when that's all they've been doing for 12 years. And the numbers we're talking about are stunning. The research expeditions, I showed you some of those pictures earlier. You can find the rest of the pictures at my website, thenuclearproctologist.org. Those pictures are incontestable. That's unassailable documentation. We've exterminated those species because of Fukushima. This story, multiple military sources claim U.S. retrieved at least 12 alien spacecraft and alleged pilot or two. Now, the sources that are coming out, there's a couple of sources. One of them is Michael Schellenberg, of all people, Environmental Progress, who we've covered yearly, multiple times a year, and his crew, right? And he was down there for the vote in Taiwan with the polar bear suits and passing out money and support from Forbes, right? Now he seemed to be spearheading that narrative. And there's 2-3 different ways you can see why it's... Now, if it's true, and it wouldn't surprise me, obviously, if it's true and Michael Schellenberg is involved, well, he's trying to ride that wave, right? You'd be that early adopter, and then they can control the narrative. And they're promoting nuclear at the same time as he was doing it. Now, it says he was a former public relation firm employee, right, so to speak. But he's well known. He was an actual politician for several years. He's deep. He's really deep undercover, this guy. He's heavily embedded, entrenched with the nuclear industry on top of that. And so I was trying to sort out, understand, was he trying to ride the wave? Because the industry will put him up on a pedestal, and they did, I'll show you. And there's some weird stuff going on there. And that the people they got to answer to this. They can't. This is so random, right? That they came out with this story. So my take is maybe he's riding the wave. That'd be pretty crazy news. That would well, we're gonna have nuclear weapons because the aliens are coming, Dana. We've talked about that over the years. Nothing surprises me. I mean, space is so big. Nothing surprises me when it comes to space, right? But what the hell is Michael Schellenberg doing in the middle of all this? It's like throwing a big turd in the punch bowl at a party, right? Imagine having a baby shower and somebody throws a big turd of dog shit in the punch bowl. That's what Michael Schellenberg is. He's the big turd, the punch bowl. What's he doing in this equation? House Republican plot budget war. So this was the Washington Examiner on the same day. On the same day. So this was Bro Bible, Michael Schellenberg. This was Washington Examiner on Michael Schellenberg. Talking about collusion between the executive branch and social media. Now he's talking about censorship. And he's the very grand. Every time we talk about Michael, it's usually heavy censorship for about a week after. He's extremely connected in the industries. So then I watched a number of these videos trying to figure out what was going on. I couldn't understand this one, so I watched Russell Brand, who's very popular, right? Matt Tabbitt and Michael Schellenberger. It's such a weird combination. Expose censorship industry complex. Censorship industry complex. Well, we're certainly victims. It really exists, and we're certainly victims of it. But again, Michael Schellenberg was saying that he's completely censored. Now, he was going to be doing a public speech or tour and they had tickets and everything. Central Hall, Westminster, Thursday, the 22nd, and showcasing. And now they got him in the front, to the left, the very first typical. That's a very prestigious place. So he showed up on the hill, and when he's telling the lies, he looks just like James Hansen. He has these little pauses. And we've known him we covered him for over a decade straight. And so I was trying to figure out, he was talking about censorship. This is the part, and I was just trying to wrap my mind around it, and we'll get to it. So I went back and I got these, and I was looking through what the hell is going on. So who else, in the same day, he was at the Telegraph. He was on the hill, which I showed you. He was on Fox News. This is all in the same 24-hour period, by the way. But yet he was talking about censorship. So you had 11 hours, 9 hours ago, 15 hours ago, 23 hours ago, 5 days ago. And he's piggybacking off it. He wants to have a revolution to go against the elites for censorship. He wants to fight back again. Now, he's considered one of the worst orchestrators of censorship out there. I'm just very confused anyway. Former public relations professional who was pumping nuclear on that day. If you go watch the interviews, he was pumping nuclear. Like, I'm pro-nuclear. But anyway, it's very dubious. When Michael Schellenberg is involved, if you can get him out of the equation, everything else is pretty cool. Climate change and nuclear power. Gee, I wonder what that could mean. He's co-founder in Breakthrough Institute, we covered too many times. California Peace Coalition, and the founder of Environmental Progress, where he puts people on a pedestal in different countries. And I can't even remember their names off the top of my head, unfortunately. But he was talking about censorship, and I found him on about 10 different sites. Just a small search, unless that he was... Major media is millions of people each time, right? Censorship is killing me. I can't go viral. He's up in all this media. Hard case. I don't know. He's a spectator for Australia. 16 hours before. Vaccines, up there with vaccines. This is Michael Schellenberg. He showed up on the Wall Street Journal 3 hours that same day. And this was the Bro Bible, the one that I showed you originally. So at least 12 alien spacecrafts. but then they're talking about collusion for censorship. So I don't know what's going on. I do know though that it's really interesting. If there's 12 spacecrafts, alien spacecrafts, and aliens, that's not news they want to get out because they want people like cattle, basically, or even worse, they want them like goats or something like that. Where they anyway, it's really, he was saying he's censored, but I found him all over the place in that 24-hour period. And over the last week, many more. So he's not censored. And he's got an absurd, dubious history with us. But I would love to see an alien species, 12, like, because I always felt that we had an alien invasion. If they can make it here, their weapons are going to be much more sophisticated than ours, right? It's not going to be like some 1950 science fiction movie, where the aliens visit. We as aliens visit other civilizations and bring them cigars and shit. It's not. The technology discrepancy was going to put them in the driver's seat, not us, right? But Michael, the final thought on him was that Michael Schellenberg was calling to organize a movement, and particularly for that show or that presentation that night or that week, well, coming up actually, 22nd of June, it was calling for it was like he was the Joan of Arc or something, and he wanted the world to follow in his footsteps and take on the tyrants. I think maybe they're trying to identify I don't know. I shouldn't say anything, right? But that was crazy to see Michael Schellenberg pumping nuclear at the same time. Once a scumbag, always a scumbag, but holy shit, that's kind of taking it too far, Michael Schellenberger. Cooling Fukushima possible after connection to the grid. So this, again, propaganda is something, isn't it? So this is the 22nd of March 2011. This is 10 days or 11 days later. All of the 6 crippled reactors are connected to the national grid on Tuesday. But how are you going to connect? Where are you going to hook the power cord up to a nuclear meltdown? I'm confused. Well, at least nobody died, Dana. Well, actually, there was around an extra 12,000 people. The death rates might give the creeps to somebody. In a single month that died of heart attacks, not counting cancers and cardiac diseases, that was skyrocketed. But you had, in a single month, an extra 12,700 people dying of heart attacks in a nuclear wasteland. But it wasn't attributed to nuclear wasteland. Their parents used to smoke, Dana. They got polonium in cigarettes. Did you know that, Dana? Huh, Dana? Like the industry's been telling the same lies for 80 years or something. And they've been doing so much damage that the poll tonight kind of tells the story. Has 80 years of nuclear power plants, disease factory, nuclear meltdowns, ocean dumping, fuel pool emissions, the burn pits, the constant emissions jeopardized the future of humanity and the 8 million species? Yeah. And so we got nuclear energy is tough sell in Washington, and safety issues at Richland plant won't help. So this is another shocking story. It never stops with this industry. If Washington State is going to reach 100% clean energy goals by 2045, then advanced nuclear reactor technologies must be included in the mix. But why? It must be included with the mix. Geothermal, by the way, is the best way to go, right? And New York, the problem with New York is if you drill below 500 feet, it's considered mining. So you can't have real geothermal because you weren't allowed to drill below 500 feet. But they're actually going to change some of the legislation to make it work. Because geothermal is here, small modular reactors and fusion probably won't ever show up. And they say, well, Dana, you know, the nuclear submarines are small modular reactors, Dana, so shut up. Well, actually, no. Well, yeah, but you got 160 abandoned in Russia from the Soviets, just ran up on beaches in those northern dumping ground. 160. United Kingdom got 23, is it? 24, 25? Just in one area that don't know what to do with. How to decommission it. You got so many of them that have sunk worldwide, the nuclear subs with missiles, and how many were scuttled by the Soviets and Russia in the Arctic, along with 18,000 dumps. Small modular reactors can considered clean, safe, and reliable energy source, and looks pretty promising, Dana. Yes, so does Elon Musk on the moon or on Mars, but nobody's looking, waiting, sitting, wondering when to set the clock to go watch it, because it's not going to happen in your lifetime. But small modular reactors, why would you use small modular reactors when you got geothermal everywhere, right under your feet? Green energy from the ground up, understanding geothermal, is clean, reliable, sustainable form of power, so take that. It harnesses the Earth's natural heat to generate electricity. The potential to provide a significant portion of the entire planet by radioactive decay of minerals. That's what's causing the heat down into the Earth. Is actual natural radioactive decay, something we're already acclimated to through genetic superior selection, and is distributed so far, so uniformly, that over billions of years we have created that environment. Three main types of geothermal: dry steam, flash steam, binary. Dry steam plants are the oldest, simplest form of geothermal. They got so many ways to do the turbine, it's ridiculous. You can have the whole planet working on it 50 years ago if you even tried. Don't need gas, oil, or coal. And you can run on your own power, too. What a terrible idea, Dana. Safety issues at Richland plant won't help. I was a little bit shocked about this. Small modular reactors, clean, safe, clean. Climate scientists, which were created, that genre was created to promote nuclear, by the way, climate scientists. And we've seen extremes of it where the solution to everything was a nuclear power plant. Cut your finger, well, you need a nuclear power plant up your butt. And regional lawmakers are trying for years to educate the public on the advancements in nuclear technology. One pipe fitter, right, this is not work, they're just temporary workers, had 961 millirims, 961,000 microsieverts. Like one microsiever is typically an evacuation zone. 961,000 microsievers is all crap. And another one had 711,000 microsievers. Or I'm sorry, this is millirims. I screwed up. That's different. I got it there. It's just 9,600 microsievers. Right. My mistake. I'll get there. 2,000 millirem per year is the legal limit. These are huge doses. This is 9,600 microsieverts doses. So multiply that by 2, and that's considered legal. They said the exposure within the regulator's limits for annual radiation exposure over the whole year, not over a couple of days. They acknowledged the failure to take follow-up steps to assess the exact dose received by the 2 workers. Have a nice day. Some workers working on it because they're not regulars, right? On the pipe received unexpected exposure to radiation, according to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. 18 other workers were unintended uptakes of less than a millirem, which is 1,000 microsieverts. It's enough to make you sick for the rest of your life, because your body is producing so much white blood cells, you're severely harmed. After just passing by an area as they evacuated the room, and a radiation protection technician received internal doses of 14,000 microsieverts. So internal is airborne. It is airborne. So the people that were running past it would have got more than a millirem. This is airborne. This is saturation. So they should have been used in Becquerels, right? Internal dose, right? That's terrifying. That's a horrific. In the nuclear industry, safety is our top priority, which is the complete opposite, obviously. Energy Northwest emphasized at no point did contamination leave the building or put the health and safety of the public at risk. Well, how could it not leave the building when, if they were getting internal doses, becquerels of physical atoms, where did it go? Still, even with such assurances, mishaps make it tougher to combat the anti-nuclear stance throughout the state. Yeah, everybody hates me. I think I'll eat some worms. Bernard sponsored House Bill 1584 this year, which would have ensured nuclear energy would be considered alongside of clean energy, the dirtiest energy in the planet, making sure it's going to be labeled as clean. Green, too cheap to meter. Yeah, well, it's always fun. Yeah. James Conca, which from Forbes, we won't even cover him. He's so disgusting. He's like, well, he's not as bad as Rod Adams. I shouldn't. It'd be pretty hard to be worse than Rod Adams. He's doing his best he can, but Rod's just insane. But I respect Rod because he's animal. Like, he would go out and get 4 or 5 nuclear experts every second Saturday or something, and would do a blog. This was just an employee at a plant, right? Ex-Navy submarine worker, and he was just a disgusting lawyer. And so he would get 4 or 5 of these nuclear physics academics or students or whatever the case may be, get them on a radio show on video, and they would tell you it was like a banana and a potato chip, and they would yuck it up. And they would do these 2 or 3 hour blogs twice a month. And he done that for about 3 decades, or not 3 decades, but about 2 decades. So that James Conqueror actually teaches police about dirty bombs and stuff. Like they're the worst of the humans got to offer. They're the Wade Allisons of North America. He's a nuclear waste researcher. I don't know if I actually ever heard him described that way before. And a trustee of the Herbert M. Parker Foundation, a trustee of a foundation at the Washington State University Tri-Cities in Richland. Can you imagine that statement? Has written many articles and spoken around the country about the safety of small modular reactors that don't exist. That's what he does. He's like Schellenberg. That's what he done for probably 2 decades, right? And now all of a sudden he's a reborn anti-establishment, anti-censorship. So he's basically the turd in the punch bowl as far as I can tell. Because we've been covering him for a very long time. He says small modular reactors have been used reliably for decades in the Navy. Yeah, there's the Navy. There's your nuclear submarines abandoned. Terrifying history of nuclear submarine graveyards. Might want to look that up sometime. Rotting nuclear subs pose a threat to waste of wars. More than 100 decommissioned submarines, reactors intact, are floating in the rusty oblivion in nearby fjords and bays because Russia cannot afford to offload the spent fuel and cut them up. Uh, 37 Chinese aircraft swarmed Taiwan's air defense. Like, seriously, right? If China wants Taiwan, they'll just take it. There's not much Taiwan can fight a little bit, but they'll get annihilated immediately. They'll just abandon their post like the Kuwaiti, the Ba'ath Party had over in Kuwait. Call of Duty just made nukes easier to get than ever before. Call of Duty made nukes. It's just, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing when you see that kind of stuff. Because one side, it'll teach the kids the subject, but you got to worry about the propaganda because kids are so easily manipulated, right? Reinvest the military funds for real solutions. The United States government spent more than $1 trillion a year for the military, yet the country has massive homelessness. Infrastructure is crumbling. Working class people can barely survive week to week. We're at each other's throats politically, blaming the other for our problems. When the solution is staring us in the face, massively cut the military budget, close down the 800 military bases worldwide that are stocked with nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons, and reinvest the public's well-being. And it's a win-win. Hear, hear. Justin Bieber's dad apologizes over offensive Pride Month message. Acknowledging the nuclear family is now offensive. And so we've been talking about this a bit, where nuclear is causing a lot of people to be born mutated, right? Because when you look at the history of the nuclear fallout, how it mutates. And so they're expecting a lot more transgender, so to speak, children, humans, but this is going to happen in the animal kingdom too because of radioactive fallout, being born. I'll give you an example. Hang on. I'll remind you, this stuff is not going to be that easy. There's nothing easy about this subject, but it's an important subject. Unfortunately, so after Chernobyl, Belarus and Ukraine is full of orphanages. And the disfigurement is real, right? But we do know that sexual issues after radiation contamination is a real disease, right? Where you cause these horrific issues. So these are hard pictures, I'm sure. But this is the orphanages that are abandoned children in Belarus and Ukraine. The nuclear industry won't even give them a color television or a radio, you know. They were asked what would they like by these foundations, and they said a TV. Because they spent their whole life not even seeing the TV, abandoned because of Chernobyl. Caused so many illnesses and diseases, not immune deficiencies and injuries. And so because Fukushima is so prolific, I'm calculating this is why we're seeing this big transgender push where you're not even allowed to have a nuclear family, right? You can only be, like, remember Sam from the nuclear industry we covered recently, right? He was running the nuclear industry, but he wasn't a he or a she, he was a they or a them. There was no gender. So they've been pushing this agenda heavily, but since Fukushima, that's when the agenda was just vicious ever since. Now it's ramping up because we're 12 years down the road, right? And so a lot of people growing up, and they're particularly pointing at the children. I'm guessing, but it's a pretty good guess that plays into why we're seeing this symmetrically worldwide. They're setting up, right, the system to accommodate the mutations that are coming down the road. Commonwealth Fusion raised $2 billion. $2 billion. Yeah, it looks like they need $2 billion. Look at it. That's pretty complicated looking, Dana. It doesn't release greenhouse gases that causes global warming, which of course is all it does. That's what radiation is. It's pulsing energy, invisible plumes cover the entire planet, pulsing energy every second for millions of years. And every day you're adding a plume to it through the fuel pools and other accidents. But all the fuel pools worldwide are hemorrhaging radiation into the environment. Similar to fission, fusion does not release any of the greenhouse gases that causes global warming. It also does not generate long-lasting nuclear waste. First off, it does, and second off, it doesn't exist. First off, it doesn't exist. But hypothetical papers written about it shows it does create quite a lot of nuclear waste. Not just the tritium either. For all these reasons, fusion is often called a holy grail. Fusion is 100% fantasy. Renewables can do the job and will do the job long before that pipe dream. Fusion is about weapons and other things, but it's got nothing to do with energy. That's the narrative they're using to justify and throwing huge amounts of money at it. Kenya breaks the ground on a 35 megawatt geothermal power plant. So 35,000 people worth of energy. That exists. Fusion doesn't exist. Small modular reactors doesn't exist. And by the way, whatever a small modular reactor can do, geothermal can do better. So they want to achieve 465,000 megawatts of geothermal steam And that will provide electricity for 750,000 Kenyans. So it's about half the price of a large reactor without going over budget and a decade behind schedule added to it. And you can do most of it in 1 year. What? Not 15 years? Like a nuclear plant, Dana? No, 1 year or so. A fusion power plant has been so far firmly rooted in the realms of science fiction. $2 billion venture capital from the likes of Bill Gates, the Breakthrough Energy venture, Google, John Doerr, Kostler Ventures, lower carbon capital, Time Venture, and more. So this one company got all the big players, shakers and movers, just dropping money on them, bags of money on them. Here you go, boys, have some friggin' fusion fun on my nickel. There's the big shot charge. Yeah, we're not going to do nothing, but we made a lot of money. And we stopped coming up with solutions. That's one of the biggest crimes, I think, of fusion is, right, all this false narrative is people are not trying to come up with solutions. Oh, fusion's coming, why bother developing other technology, right? And so they're interfering in the future of humanity on top of that, and the 8 million species. The first factor is increasing urgent demand for new sources of energy that do not contribute to climate change. And climate change is 80 years of radioactive emissions that each one never goes away. And this model is based on 16 days of radioactive fallout. 16 days. And so that's a plume that covers the entire planet for millions of years, never goes away, and pulses energy every second at the speed of light. It's killing the bacteria and the fungus and mutating the stem cells of all the species and insects and birds and mammals and animals, babies, and sterilizing many, many different more species. And each day there's a plume like that from 1,000 fuel pools worldwide. That one's from Fukushima. A geothermal energy boom may be coming. Ex-oil workers are leading the way. 4 new geothermal projects announced for Cornwall, UK. 20 megawatt to 100 megawatt by 2026. Well, all of these are better solution than the fabled small modular reactors and, like idiot fusion. Waste package is stuck at WIP parking lot. So they got nuclear waste at WIP. WIP won't take, no, not touching it. Don't care, we got a union. So they okayed to return to Savannah River. Savannah was like, get that out of here. Give it to WIP, they'll figure it out. WIP's like, no, not doing it. There's military waste in it. One great big stupid industry, isn't it? Expired paperwork. French MP approved 6-year, $413 billion military budget, but they can't even throw a couple of million for geothermal. That'll compete with nuclear, Dana. You can't do that. I hear you, man. I hear you. French MP approved 6-year, $413 billion military budget bill. $413 billion. I wonder if they can't give the French Polynesian victims any money for poisoning them with radioactive fallout from all the nuclear weapons testing. The military needs it. That makes perfect sense. Thank God for the military. God bless the military. Without them, you could have hospitals and schools and healthcare. With extra lines of credit for the nuclear and ammunition to Ukraine. What a stupid industry. Your job is to provide fodder for their wars, right? With your children. With extra lines of credit for nuclear and ammunition. I wonder at the time, are they going to be sending depleted uranium munitions to Ukraine too? Historic, which is now bigger than ever, $413 billion, with the annual budget set to increase annually to reach $68 billion by 2030, a 40% boost compared to the $295 billion in military spending 2019 to 25. The military budgets have never ever been questioned. Rubber stamp. There better be no money left for the communities. Rubber stamp. But our children can't even eat. No, the military needs it. Sorry. We got to rape other people's children in poor people's countries. They're not technically included in the budget. Equipment supplied to Ukraine. So that's not even technically in the budget. Wink, wink. The equipment supplied to Ukraine will see a further $16 billion for ammunition. $16 billion worth of ammunition from France. And you wonder why nobody's got a future. Every time I hear these types of stories, it just drives home the point of how pathetic the nuclear industry actually is. Well, disposable robots, they're only $70,000 each, so they can send them into the hot zone, Dana, where humans can't go. It's Donna Ray we're talking about, by the way. Scary Donna Ray. Look at these outfits. Here, put that on. They should have to wear it all the time if you work for the nuclear industry, actually. Hello, little humans. I work for the nuclear industry. So if you work for the nuclear industry, you should have to wear these kind of suits at the supermarket everywhere else. So people know to avoid you. Got your shovel? This is the craziest pictures imaginable. Well, at least it's not a paper suit, right? One of the planned trials involves Spot using 3D laser scanning to make an external survey of Donna Ray's facility. It could be 22,333 to year 2,333 before the site is safe for reuse. Right, Bob? Yeah, sure, George. That is some creepy picture, man. Yeah, take the shovel and go over there with George. No, it can't hurt you. You got your suit on, haven't you? Man, that's something. That's from Donna Ray. That freaks me out. It was constructed in the 1950s to develop fast nuclear reactors, which were plutonium, what they call breeder reactors. He won't be breeding anything in the future. Join Bruce Power this summer for a narrated site bus tour and explore the interactive visitors city center. So they hire a bunch of pretty little young girls, college students probably or something. Hi, how are you? want to come on a bus tour with us? We're going to tell you how cool nuclear is. Everybody sing with me. Oh, nuclear, our Lord and Savior. After a security check of each person's government-issued ID photos, Bruce Power, man. Bruce. Just call me Bruce. I said, Bruce, you ever heard of Bruce Almighty? That comedy, Bruce Almighty? That was actually based on the president of Bruce Power. He thought he was God, right? Visitors will continue to learn about clean and reliable nuclear energy. I hope you had a great day. So Bruce Committee learned about post-deep geological repository site selection. The Nuclear Waste Management Organization that hasn't managed anything. After 18 years, they're no closer than they were 18 years ago. But they're going to hold a referendum to measure the willingness of the communities. They're going to do a 5-year study and then have a referendum. It's kind of backwards, isn't it? So shouldn't you have the referendum first and then go in and spend all that money? Well, Dana, they got $24 billion. They do whatever they want. Nobody's going to check. There's no accountant going to check to see what they're spending money on. They're giving it away in the communities as fast as the interest is coming in. Hey, you want $1 million? Come over here. Scratch my back. Nuclear Fuel Complex celebrates annual day. It's every day, right? In India? India celebrates nuclear every day. Every day is the annual Celebrate Nuclear Fuel Complex Day. 365 days a year, everybody celebrates. You get a cake and whistles and party favors and dancing snakes and everything else snake. Nuclear Fuel Complex celebrates annual day. And so the punchline in this is nuclear fuel complex. You heard of the military industrial complex? Well, there's a nuclear fuel complex. It's the same thing, only worse. The nuclear fuel is what it's all about. Because once it goes through the cycle, it takes out, now it's weapons grade, right? That's when you can start to make bombs after you do that. Energy is a byproduct of keeping it cool. No, it's for energy, Dan. The nuclear fuel, and we've heard these connotations from all the major players worldwide over the years. It's like the nuclear fuel complex. You can see them, right? Just get a little bit eviler. United Kingdom Atomic Energy Agency award funding focus on fusion fuel requirements. Most of the fuel they're getting now is from the Darlington reactor, which Ontario Hydro actually went bankrupt after trying to build it. No nuclear. 7 companies, universities were selected for $8.5 million USD. The school, well, let me rephrase that. 7 companies and schools of mass destruction have been selected for big bursaries. And so they get the students to come up with the solutions to murder each other for generations. And you call it an education. Enormous promises to source sustainable, low-carbon energy for future generations. Well, what about geothermal? A therapeutic nuclear medicine market. Therapeutic. There's literally no such thing as a therapeutic nuclear medicine market. There's zero nuclear that's therapeutic. The International Atomic Energy Agency standards are based on natural, not safety. It's based on natural stuff, not man-made, in other words. And then as soon as you see the companies that are lined up to get a shake, the prominent players, these are terrible people. And Curium Pharmaceuticals, they're Australia, I think, aren't they? Don't correct me if I'm wrong, but because I'm wrong sometimes, and others that don't want to be named. Cancer research. All cancer research is based upon anthropogenic man-made isotopes that attack everything with replicating cells. It's like growing up and never pissing, right? Can't be done. The U.S. animal model market valuation reached $1 billion in 2022. They're expecting it to grow by 4.3%. Controversy still inflamed critics of plant vogue. Controversies. Cost doubling to north of $35 billion. They just added another $400 million or something. And $461 million in expenses in the latest reports. In the fall, state regulators are set to hold hearings to determine how much more expenses should be passed along to ratepayers. It's quite a scam, eh? Well, first off, they're collecting money, putting a certain percentage away from the electricity bill to replace these facilities. Instead of doing that, they blow that, and then they retroactively charge you for the next plant. This is a great job, right? You got to pay every month for the rest of your life, basically, so they can have a free power plant that they can make a profit off. Instead of you getting cheap electricity, and their profits need to go up every year. But you're paying for it. So, like, if you start up your own, if the people that are paying the bill just all chipped in $500 and built the facility, now it's bought and paid for, then all the money being made would go back into their pockets after expenses, right? That's the best way to do it. But instead, the corporations have manipulated it. That's supposed to be in another story we never got to. Facebook had to pay out $925 million class action settlement, but they wouldn't admit the wrongdoing as part of the settlement. Nobody get a criminal record. So you commit a crime where you owe $725 million, but you don't get a criminal record because you have corporate personhood. Can't go to jail, and you can do it in another country, even though it's a crime. Unless you get caught, it's not a crime. And by the time you get caught, the fine is only 1% of what the profits were. So it makes sense to commit the crime. Precision nuclear physics in Idiom-115 beta decay spectrum. They got to freeze it to 280 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. And has a half-life of 100 trillion years. This is a natural decay. This is the stuff that's in the earth, right? And it's just so, it's inconceivable. You can't register it on a Geiger counter. It's like a banana, potassium banana, but actually weaker. But it's there. And if you got a quantity of it and you irradiate it, you can produce a whole lot of other idiom isotopes that are very, very energetic, right? This is how they do it. They piggyback off one, the natural, irradiate quantities of it and come up with man-made, and then conflate it as natural to get around loopholes. Leak repairs at base and housing UK decommissioned nuclear submarines. These military Navy bases, these are massive These are unbelievable massive. And the runoff into the estuaries and the rivers and oceans, you can't contain that. So the nuclear submarines in particular are supposed to be isolated. They got a little leak. It's going to be around $3 million to fix it. Work will allow the safe, secured storage of laid-up submarines for a minimum of 80 years. 80 years in the open oxygen. Break it down. Because you can't decommission it. Water level controls are typically used to manage the volume of water, depending on leak rates. Some naval locations used to store nuclear power vessels is routinely tested for contaminants. And scrap dozens, employing more than 24, of nuclear submarines at some point in 80 years' time. 27 of the UK's nuclear power submarines after they've been defueled, is the idea. They spent $500 million since the 80s on storing and maintaining its retired nuclear submarines. So we got submarines there that have been sitting there for over 40 years. And don't usually last more than 30 years before they need to go into the so-called graveyard. And who's to say if there's an accident? 40-year path to nuclear energy at Plant Folk has been cleared. It's the first reactor in more than 40 years. Watts Bar was the other one, right? It took 43 years to get that running. Keeping Diablo Canyon open wasn't political, head of the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Agency says. Well, like, why didn't you build something to replace it? Well, we can't turn it off. We got nothing to replace it. Yeah, but you had a whole bunch of money from the ratepayers was supposed to go into a fund to build something to replace it before it come time to shut it down, right? You got to shut it down at some point. No, we don't. We'll just give it extensions. Oh, it's all securely and safely. Which are not words you hear at gas plants, oil plants, or coal plants, by the way. They're unable to replace the 2,200 megawatt plant with other sources of greenhouse gas-free electric sources. Of course you could have. And the money you're talking about, you could have built double in geothermal in a tenth of the time as it would take to build a nuclear, for starters. But we know there's a big push. There's a conspiracy to keep all nuclear plants on the line working and at high speeds in overdrive to keep the megawatt numbers up. Despite the fact there's many going down offline, they're ratcheting up a lot of the reactors and running them at dangerous capacities for extended periods to keep the fable while they try to manipulate the population. Located $1.4 billion in forgivable loans. So they had money already from the ratepayers to replace it. They piddled that away on who knows what. And then they get throw money at them, but that's just another temporary solution. You still got to build something to replace it at some point. And now you jeopardize in the future by running it past its intended safe time because the containments are high pressure, over 1,000 psi, and they're brittle from neutron bombardments and X-rays and gamma shines and beta rays. Finland's nuclear catacombs. Oh, that's nice. I don't know if we heard that one before, have we? Nuclear catacombs. The industry tries. It's just it's a heartless, remorseless disease factory industry that gets worse every generation. Must remain unperturbed for millenniums, thousands of years. It'll host the world's first spent nuclear fuel disposal. Now, Finland doesn't have a lot of fuel. They only got a couple of small reactors, right? So they don't really got a lot of fuel. Well, that's a lot, I suppose. 6,500 tons of uranium. It's still a lot, but it's nothing compared to Canada or the United States or France, for instance, I guess. Low carbon, and the word low carbon, the way they throw it away, it's like you just replace and go, God bless nuclear power instead. And they would all just smoothly transition to God bless nuclear. Just send out a memo by late afternoon, everybody will be switched on. Climate-friendly energy source. So it's social engineering, and it's heavy social engineering, which is MK Ultra in many ways. There's sinister stuff too, right? But that's generally what it is. It's social engineering, and it's finally gone into the mad realm. We're actually living in the twilight, the actual real-life twilight zone. As the world struggles to combat global warming. It's like Beetlejuice. If you say it 3 times, it'll have no effect. Global warming. You're getting very, very sleepy. Global warming. Global warming. Sleepy. Watch the clock. You're very, very sleepy. Oh, just so happens we got an interview with the father of global warming. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Brocker. And then there's the father of climate change, or net zero, rather, which is Miles Allen. There's BP Oil, which is the father of the carbon footprint. Did I miss anybody? Which was a public relation campaign in the media, and now everybody's worried about their carbon footprint, right? It was a total scam, same as climate change. And then you got good old climate change himself, James Edward Hansen, one of the most hateful creatures I've ever come across in reality. His testimony was a turning point in the history of global climate change. It was the pivotal moment, an official beginning of the global climate change policy debate. You had James Hansen, BP Oil, Miles Allen, and Wallace Brocker. Right? Climate change, global warming, net zero, and carbon. And so what are you bombarded with in all this news cycle? Those 4 things. And that's the 4 people that created those papers. Yeah, I had no idea it was going to blow up like this. Thanks to UN. UN took all of them and weaponized them against ants, birds, trees, bushes, and humans. Everything. Weaponized that, and now you got to kiss the global warming, climate change, net zero, carbon free ring every morning when you walk out your front gate on one knee. Swear allegiance to UN, and then you can go about your day Rinse, recycle, get up and do it again the next morning. Still waiting for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission statement about importing high-level nuclear waste in Canada. We don't even got a spot to store our waste. They denied there's any conversations, which means they're up to it, right? Used nuclear fuel is not going to be imported into Canada, says nuclear waste management representative. Like they got the credibility. Never mind. They got no credibility, Dana. Chalk River National Laboratories, employee recognized by the Canadian nuclear industry for excellence. They got to give them awards to lull them into that complacency on a regular basis. What do you mean you're not doing nothing around here? You got those awards over there. You should be proud to poison humanity for 1,000,000 years. It was your calling, like your parents and their parents and their parents. Is nuclear fusion energy salvation? So the social engineering, when it comes to nuclear, it's prolific, isn't it? I'm not going to take you down that road because that's some serious brainwashing right there. Like a third-rate zombie movie on Netflix, delusions of nuclear fusion repeatedly rise from the dead. Delusions of nuclear fusions. I love it. Another risk of a nuclear meltdown in sight. Fusion, so the cheery news were, is safe, effective, efficient. The Atoms for Peace fake pretense that there could be a disconnect between nuclear power and nuclear bombs. A few decades went by on March the 28th, 1979, 3 Mile Island melted down. Well, like the Atoms for Peace came out the day after Santa Susana melted down, I believe, 1959, right? Then there's Chernobyl in 86. New York Academy of Science published a detailed analysis estimating, well, that detailed analysis was from 5,000 papers from the former Soviet Union academics that were translated into a book, and the New York Science Academic of Science reviewed it and published a paper that corresponded to 900,000 people died worldwide from Chernobyl fallout. But obviously, it was infinitely worse than that. It was hundreds and hundreds of millions that died from debilitating diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries. But there's 1,800 diseases from radiation infestation, from the radiation plague. In the 50s, the doctors would describe it as a biological weapon. And so again, Fukushima 3 nuclear reactors melted down with 4 and 8 pupils, spreading radioactivity in the neighboring Pacific Ocean and poisoning unknown quantities of aquatic life. And I showed research expeditions earlier. It poisoned everything. It's an extinction event. So each generation from World War II through today has memories of horrendous nuclear events, which MIPS has been totally unsuccessful at erasing. The military-industrial pseudo-scientific complex, MIPS. One of the few acronyms I think I actually like. The military-industrial pseudo-scientific complex. There's a lot of them out there. There's a whole lot of that stuff going down. A whole lot. How we doing here anyway? Oh, we're getting up there. I better start boogieing. I got 2 minutes left. There's been 100 significant accidents happened in the world, nuclear power plants from the 50s to 2010. fuel pools, and there's 2 at the top of each reactors. Worldwide, there's around 1,000 of them. There's around 220 test reactors, like small reactors, that people don't take in consideration. They're unshielded because they're small, which means they're hemorrhaging radiation directly into the environment. So the fuel pools are the number one enemies right now. They got decades of reactor cores in them, hemorrhaging, splitting the atoms, and that evaporates up tall stacks into the communities. Has 80 years of nuclear power plant meltdowns, sea dumping, fuel ponds emissions, accidents, you name it, jeopardized the future of humanity. Yeah. Yes, it has. The Canadian Nuclear Society Conference comes to St. John's, New Brunswick. And New Brunswick nuclear power plant releases a hideous amount of radiation into the environment and the Atlantic. Hang on, see if I can find it. There you are. What is it, 14 million trillion atoms a year, becquerels a year of tritium? 16 million, point per. 16 million trillion. Sizewell, UK only releases 8 trillion. Canada's point per in St. John's, New Brunswick, releases 16,400,000 trillion atoms of tritium 3H into the environment each year, with 120,000 year half-life. It's disgusting, isn't it? The CANDU reactors, Canada CANDU reactors are brutal disease factories. And I don't believe that was an accident. I only got one story to get through. Might as well do it. Rosatom says nuclear cleanup in the Arctic is done. They got 18,000 dumps up there from the Soviets and the Ruskies that we know about. It's not counting all the nuclear detonations they done up there, obviously. But they scuttled submarines that were stuffed with fuel assemblies and reactor cores. And it's just this incredible list of barrel dumps and ships, cargo ships that were stuffed with nuclear fuel and then taken out and blown up, sank by, they just shot them with military ships and sank them. You can't claw this stuff back. And the barrels, when they get down a couple of 100 feet, implode. It implodes. Implode, like my head implodes. Okay, well, we made it through. Pretty well on the schedule, all things considered, if there's such a thing as schedule. It's just my voice usually gives out after 2 hours, so I don't like to go past 2 hours, because when I get 2.5, 3 hours, the next night is really bad for me. Pace yourself. And you can't cover everything. That's what freaks me out the most, is they tell so many lies in a 24-hour cycle. I can't cover it in a single show. All I can do is cherry pick the whole shit stuff. My favorite story tonight was 12 alien crafts are in the American. How many have the Russian got? How many have other countries got, right? Can't be just Americans. There's no harm having hopes. I don't know. You don't know. I don't know. Nobody knows for sure. And the ones that apparently do know ain't talking. I'll keep my eye on that kind of story because that's a bit interesting. It's always interesting. You know, sometimes I'll watch movies about space or documentaries about space if they're well done. You just gotta love space. Space as well. And like we can't really fathom what's the enormity of that equation. I don't think we can. That's pretty cool. Let's close the poll down. We'll call it a night, get it over with. James Lucid donated 150 on the weekend. James, thank you. And I got to pay for my site next week for the annual site, which is basically $400 a year. And so that'll definitely help. Has 80 years of nuclear power plant meltdown, sea dumping, fuel pool emissions jeopardize the future of humanity. Yeah. We got 100% yeah, by the way. I'm going to end that poll in 48 votes with 100%. Recall herbal cough sweets. Oh, yeah. I'll look that up for sure. Thank you. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night, a great day tomorrow. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. We got a crazy show. Dana Nasana. Hi, Dana. Thank you. See you tomorrow night. We got a wicked show all ready to go for tomorrow night. It's just going to get better by the time we get there. I'm expecting a big earthquake in Japan. They had one on the wrong side there a month ago. But that fault line off Fukushima, the longer it takes for these earthquakes to happen, the bigger they are, right? So we're expecting a big one anytime, any day. I've been saying that for weeks, so we're just sitting and hoping it won't happen, but it's a fault line. And you know, with fault lines, what happens? Yeah, loot $1 billion, pay back $1 million. That's right. Thanks, you. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. I had to do the poll tonight. My poll got cancelled right out of the blue on me. Send out hugs for Stephen Young. And I know how hard it is for Stephen to type in the comment section, so we appreciate it. Good exercise for you, Steve. Actually, it's probably not, but we'll see everybody tomorrow night anyway, right? So, good night. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you make it this far. YouTube's getting a little cheap on that stuff. Yeah, Keto had a 6.2 today. That's right. I'll be covering that tomorrow night. Thanks, James. Big time. Yeah, because Keto, I got to check that out right after the show. Wow. Good stuff. Good night, everybody. Yeah, good night.